Football Central Radio Network. I am one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman, joined today for a very special preview episode ahead of the Falcons Monday night matchup with the New York Giants. I am joined by Matt Karoly of Rise Up Reader, who we've had Matt on the show recently. Say hello, Matt.
Hello, Matt.
And also we are getting a nice guest from the Falcoholic, none other than Cory Woodroof. Cory has also been a guest of the show. Welcome back, Cory. Say hello, Cory. Man.
Hello.
So we will be talking about that Giants game coming up in about an hour and a half as we're sitting here talking. And we'll get into that'll be the meat of the show, but we have other topics we want to touch upon. We'll talk a little bit about the Bucs game from last week, and we'll do what we always do: start off the show with some roster moves that the Falcons have made in the last week since we last did the show. And the big one was putting running back Devontae Freeman on injured reserve. I will wait to get you guys' thoughts on that because we got a couple of mailbag questions dealing with Devontae. But to fill his roster spot, they signed kicker Giorgio Tavecchio, and they also signed linebacker Jermaine Grace to the Falcons practice squad. He replaced Richie Brown. Thoughts on Tavecchio's signing?
Yeah, I mean, not a whole lot of surprise with the name. That was kind of the kicker that a lot of people had thought would come in and replace Bryant, just because, you know, they did bring him in at the end of the preseason to work him out and see what he has in case something like this were to happen. So, you know, the name itself isn't surprising. I think the one thing that did catch my eye, and I think it caught yours as well, Aaron, it was reported that they gave him a 2-year deal. Now, I haven't seen any other details confirming that, or, you know, anything on Spot Track or Over the Cap, the salary cap websites, in regards to that. So that would be the only shocking aspect of it, is if they did in fact give him a 2-year deal to essentially, you know, the first year being a tryout and the second year depending on if they wanted to move on from Matt Bryant because of his salary cap hit, and they felt that Tavecchio would be the answer to replace him. You know, that's something to monitor moving forward. But as far as just who they brought in, and hopefully this is just a 1 to 2 week band-aid for when Matt Bryant comes back after the bye, hopefully. You know, that's the ideal scenario. But if that's not the case, then, you know, you might be looking at the Falcons' long-term kicker in 2019 and beyond, perhaps.
Cory, I'm curious what your thoughts on the move are, but I would say I would pump the brakes on Tavecchio being a long-term kicker. I'm a little worried about kicking without Matt Bryant in there, just because kicking has been an issue around the league this year, and fortunately the Falcons have had Matt Bryant. So let's see Tavecchio make some kicks before we start penciling him in anywhere. But Cory, what are your thoughts on this roster move?
I mean, it's like, if they were going to go get somebody, they might as well have gotten a guy like Tavecchio, because he's got experience and he's not bad. I mean, you know, you kind of wonder why he's not on our roster right now. And the last team that really jettisons him was the Oakland Raiders, and they kind of just cut whoever because Gruden just kind of does whatever, and he has no idea what he's doing right now. But you know what? That's neither here nor there. It's fine. I mean, I like him. He seems good. It's not money, but I mean, I don't know. Money's hurt, so trying to get a kicker off the street is not a great plan, but he seems fine. So we'll see. If he misses a bunch of field goals tonight, then that would be not great, I guess. Be bad.
Yeah, definitely. What are your thoughts? We got a mailbag question from Evan Birchfield. What are your thoughts on Jermaine Grace's return? Cory, you can go first.
Yeah, I feel like it was funny. I think the most excitement I've seen, maybe in the calendar year of 2018, from Falcons Twitter is when Jermaine Grace got signed to the practice squad. I mean, there were literally people singing in the streets about how excited they were. And, you know, I'm of two minds. Like, one, it's nice to see the Falcons get back a guy who they tried to develop at first and who seemed like to have some promise, but it's not like they went out and got like, the second coming of Brian Urlacher or something. I mean, he's good. He's kind of bounced around the league a little bit and still trying to kind of struggle to find his place. And if he's going to end up finding that potential, I'm glad it could potentially be in Atlanta as opposed to somewhere else. It's nice. This season has been terrible. So when something like this happens, you're like, oh, that's nice. It's just, it's just like finding $1 on the ground. It's not 20, but I'll take it.
What are your thoughts, Matt?
I mean, similar thoughts. It's nice to get someone back and maybe, undo a mistake from 2017 when they let him go prematurely, similar to Brian Hill, getting Brian Hill back. And kind of, they've basically been stashing him on the active roster for the majority of the year. So, someone to develop. Maybe he competes with Duke Riley next year for the linebacker 4 or 5 spot, for special teams reps, whatever have you. So, nothing to get too excited about, but it's obviously nice to have a familiar face that they already developed a little bit, and hopefully he can maybe find a permanent home here in Atlanta moving forward.
Yeah. I was upset when they let go of both Brian Hill and Jermaine Grace last season. I felt like we wound up drafting Ito Smith and Foye Olakun, I think, in large part to replace those two guys. Obviously those two players have shown enough early promise so far this season where you feel like that's not necessarily a mistake that the team has made or anything like that. But you do wonder if maybe those spots could have been used at other positions had they kept those two guys on the roster, and maybe where the Falcons would be at this current point. Probably not any better than 2 and 4. But, so I think this is good for Grace to come back. I remember watching him in Cleveland this summer to sort of see where his progress was, and I thought he played well, reasonably well enough to make that team. He did not make that team, wound up in Seattle, and then got cut last week, and is back in Atlanta. So I think I'm hoping that he can sort of be developed as a role player and a depth guy, and we'll see what future holds for Jermaine Grace and Brian Hill to a lesser extent. So. Let's move on and let's talk a little bit about last week's Bucs game. Do you have any lingering thoughts from last week's action that you feel compelled to share?
Cory, if you want to go.
Yeah, it was nice. Well, it's the thing. They almost lost last week, which I think is something we all forget. And they almost lost on sincerely the dumbest play in Tampa Bay Buccaneers history. And if that had somehow been willed for the Bucs to win in that sort of a sequence of events, I would have just really assumed that the league is rigged and that they just don't want the Falcons to be happy and that they want us all to quit cheering for the team so they can move the team to Nova Scotia or something. But since it didn't happen and the Falcons ended up stopping that, Tampa Bay blunderbuss, then, I think it showed some improvement, particularly in the first half of the defense. In the second half, the defense kind of fell apart again because Jameis was getting passes off and they just looked really bad. But then the offense stopped too. So it was just kind of this really ugly cataclysm of things not working. But, it was signs of life. I mean, that's really all you can say because when you watch that Pittsburgh game, it just kind of looked like a dead fish. And then kind of, just laying in the water. And they seemed like last week they were a mediocre football team. And since that's really about all we're going to get this year, I'm just glad that that's what we got. And I think that's what we're going to see more of tonight. But, that's all we can do right now. Half the roster hurt and half the team's on IR. So when you have such a limited deck, all you can really hope for is mediocrity. So if that's what they can be consistently, the offense looked good in the first half. They fell apart when the receivers went out, but they seem to be at pretty full strength again. So we'll see how it goes. I like the way that they've played on offense this year, but the defense obviously is much to be desired.
Matt, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, not a whole lot more to add. I mean, it kind of seemed like most of the games, especially the ones that the Falcons have won, which hasn't been many so far, but basically the offense looked good. It did falter a little bit at times due to the little issues like drops, penalties, execution issues, and I know we've heard that word a lot, especially last year, but that's kind of what it boils down to for the offense. If they can execute, they're one of the best in the league, And when they did hit that lull in the second half, it was mainly because of the little things like that. And then obviously the defense. I mean, the defense almost, like Cory said, fell apart and let them win let the Bucs win in comic fashion, which would have just been another chip or another mark to add to the list of crazy ways the Falcons find themselves losing games. But didn't happen, thankfully. So they're 2-4, and now we're on the Giants, and we have a shot to get to 3-4 before the bye, and maybe somewhat get ourselves back into the NFC. But it's a thick race, so it's not going to be easy to really to make it. But we'll see what happens. Crazier things have happened before.
Okay. Do you have a pick for the brother of the week, which is something that Evan Birchfield, Cory's best friend, came up with, which is basically the player that played the best that probably won't get as much love as, from the media or from fans or whatever. Any picks for last week's Bucs game?
Evan's going to like my pick. I would have went with Jack Crawford. I think Jack Crawford has really come alive the last couple of weeks. I thought he had the best game he's had as a Falcon. He obviously notched that first sack of I believe, his Falcons career. I don't think he had one in the 4 games last year. So he's been pretty active. I mean, he's definitely been able to use that quickness to overwhelm inferior guards, and I think he's going to have another opportunity tonight against, either. Well, Will Hernandez is pretty good, but potentially against John Greco, who's now going to be the right guard for the Giants. So we'll see if he can take advantage of that matchup. But yeah, I definitely think he's been good, and Pro Football Focus has definitely taken notice to him. He has the highest pass rush grade of all the Falcons. That's including Tack and Grady Jarrett. So whatever you want to make of that, I thought that was pretty noteworthy that he's. It's not a high bar to set based on the Falcons pass rush, but the fact that he's the guy rather than someone like Tack or Grady, I think that's something that stands out. We'll see if he can continue to display that for Atlanta.
Yeah. First off, hello, Evan. This is what a consistent question. He has like 18 questions for this show, which I think is quite incredible. Honestly, I'd rather they just put Birchfield in at middle linebacker right now than what they're doing. Yeah, my brother of the week would be Desmond Trufant for that week because he basically did a really nice job of covering Mike Evans the entire game, and for that defense, that's kind of what they had to do if they had any hope of winning, is to just like limit him enough. And Evans really didn't do as much as we're used to seeing him do against the Falcons. I think it shows that Trufant has gotten better about covering Evans over the past couple of years. So, yeah, from where he was recently when Evan got to Tampa Bay, I think he's gotten a lot better on that assignment. So I would give it to True. He's very quietly having a really good year. It's one of the unsung parts that we're really not having to worry about these big, tall receivers just torching us every game, mainly because they can do other things to torch us. The opens, there's plenty of available opens to destroy this defense in the middle. But, yeah, I think Trufant's had a really nice year. I think he's living up to, getting over that kind of slump he had last year coming off injury.
Yeah, I don't really have a brother of the week because I don't really care about that game. But in terms of Trufant, piggybacking on the two players that you guys mentioned, I think Trufant's had a good year. He missed some tackles against the Saints. He got beat a couple of times against Tyler Boyd, particularly late in that game. That certainly don't sit well. But I think other than that, he's played really well this season. And Jack Crawford has quietly stepped up his game after a pretty sluggish start to the season, and sort of been sort of their most consistent pass rusher over these last 3 weeks, which I think is why, he's earned sort of the highest grade for Pro Football Focus. So we'll have to see if that changes tonight. I think, the Falcons DN, we'll get into this in a bit, but the Falcons DNs, I think, have a more favorable matchup, and we'll sort of see, with Spencer Pulley playing that center spot, Deidre Sinat should have some opportunities, at least on early downs. We'll sort of see whether or not Greco and Hernandez can hold up against Crawford and Jarrett in pass rushing situations. But speaking of which, let's move on and talk about this Giants game. The Falcons are facing the Giants, who are 1-5 at home on Monday night in just a little over an hour. Injuries situation for both teams, although the Falcons have dealt with a lot of injuries, at least relative to the 53 guys currently on the roster. This is one of the healthier games that they've had compared to previous weeks, where the only person expected to miss the game is, of course, kicker Matt Bryant, who's out with a hamstring injury. Mohamed Sanu, who missed 2 days of practice this week, was in limited capacity on Saturday, so he is expected to play along with guys like Calvin Ridley, who's dealing with an ankle injury for the Giants. Patrick Omameh was added to the injury report on Saturday with a knee injury, but he was already benched prior to that in favor of Grieco, who was a longtime starting right guard for the Browns for many years over there and playing alongside the great Austin Pastor and Alex Mack, and was pretty solid there. Russell Shepard, who's out with dealing with the neck injury, was inactive, and the Giants kick returner Jabril Davis is also out with a concussion, so he is inactive as well. But that being said, let's get into some of these matchups with the Falcons and Giants. One of the big ones is going to be Saquon Barkley against the entire Falcons defense. And I wrote whether or not the Falcons can hold him individually, what's the over-under on sort of how many total yards Saquon Barkley gets this year. Whatever that number is, I would probably take the over if I was a betting man.
That's easy money.
Yeah, seriously. He's going to go for 400 yards. It's going to be the very first 400-yard, 8-touchdown performance.
Yeah, I mean, my cousin texted me this morning. He's like, I'm going up against Saquon in fantasy. What are the chances the Falcons hold him to 26 yards on the ground? And I laughed, and I said, if that's going to happen, you need to hire a hitman, because there's no way. I mean, he's going for 30 points, I think, in fantasy. PPR or no PPR, I mean.
He's getting 26 yards on his first carry. I can pretty much.
Yeah, that's a classic Falcons opening drive thing to do for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
You gotta break him in the right way.
Yeah. So I got him on one of my fantasy teams, so I'm pretty psyched. I got him and Tevin Coleman, so I'm feeling pretty good about my chances tonight with him. So yeah, man, he's going to be a tough matchup, and we've seen this Falcon team, 2 weeks ago against Pittsburgh, where a similar type of running back who has size and speed with James Conner wrecked this Falcons team. They couldn't tackle him, and Saquon Barkley is bigger and faster than James Conner, and so one sort of assumes that they probably won't have a whole lot of success tackling him. Even teams that can tackle haven't had a lot of success tackling Saquon in the open field. So, I think the best strategy for the Falcons to eliminate Saquon from the field is to get up really big early in the game and at least take the running aspect out of his contribution to the Giants offense off the table. They can still throw the football to him, and that's still going to be problematic for the defense, as well as hoping that the Falcons' defensive line can just be that disruptive so that even checkdowns will be limited to him, which I'm not very confident, but the Giants do have a bad offensive line, and hopefully the Falcons' defensive line can step up and take care of business with some matchups there. But honestly, I think it's inevitable that he's going to have a monster game. So I just feel like hopefully he's the only one that has a monster game among the Giants playmakers. And if that's the case, then I think this is a game that at least the Falcons defense can not lose, certainly not win it. But, what are your guys' thoughts on sort of, is there any way that the Falcons can slow him down tonight?
I mean, like you said, I think the only way is just to maybe make it one-dimensional, and so that you can just key on him in the receiving game. But yeah, I'm not very hopeful that they're going to contain him, especially since the injury report with their receivers. It seems like the only two healthy guys that they've had, because they did sign someone this week or promoted someone, is Sterling Shepard and Odell Beckham. So. And with Evan Ingram coming back healthy now, I don't know if he's 100%. So, I mean, with all that being said, the offense is going to run through Saquon and likely, Odell. So he's going to be featured either way. And, obviously they know that, but with what we've seen the last 6 weeks, again, not very confident. They just got to keep him in check, keep him in front, hopefully, and rally to the ball. But that's easier said than done. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, not too confident, unfortunately.
Cory, I'm curious. Do you feel like if the Falcons dial down the Duke Riley-ness of their defense tonight and dial up the Foye Olakun of the defense tonight, do you feel like that gives them a better chance to at least contain Saquon to under 200 yards? 185, I guess, is maybe what we're shooting for?
No. I guess would be my simplest. Well, I mean, my problem is, like, if they key in on Saquon, all they're going to do is put Odell Beckham in the slot. I mean, that's all they need to do. Put him on Brian Poole and, just eat, I guess. I mean, that's just the difficult part of this defense is anything through the middle. It doesn't matter. Like, there's a reason that these teams are putting all their best players at the slot position because, as good as a player I think Poole is for kind of the fundamentals of the game, he's just not amazing in coverage. And when they get these just really, really good, fast slot corners, or slot receivers, like Odell Beckham, who's not a slot receiver but plays that position pretty darn well when he goes against a guy who can't cover him, and then you put Evan Ingram in the mix, who's a good tight end. There's just a lot of firepower on this offense. And I was worried coming into this game, they're going to make Eli Manning look like he's Eli Manning of 2011, okay? Which is never still amazing, but, solid quarterback that can go off when he wants to. And I think that could be the case tonight just because he's a veteran quarterback. This defense is still kind of messy. Hopefully the extra time off has helped out there, but he's going to be able to pick them apart if they're not in position and if they're not communicating properly. And I just worry that might be one of those games where, But at the same time, this is the healthiest the defense has been since week 1, I guess. So maybe, or at least week 2, because, Keanu and Dion obviously are on IR and Rico's on IR, but everybody else that they want is out there. So there's really no major guy right now in the defense that's hurt. So maybe that could help, but right now I'm really not optimistic about this matchup.
Okay. Now, on the flip side, is there a matchup, whether offense or defense, from the Falcons' perspective that you do really like in this game coming up?
I kind of like Hooper again, going up against Alec Ogletree. I think Alec Ogletree is definitely a liability in coverage and someone that, Hooper's the last couple of weeks has shown that he can beat the one-on-ones, and Matt's been going to him and having trust in him. So I think this could be the third week in a row we see Austin Hooper having a big game. And then, I think another one to throw out there that you mentioned is, the tackles of the Giants have been, ranked the worst in the league. So I think if there's any matchup for Vic Beasley to get going, and, everyone, pretty much everyone's given up on him at this point. I still hold out a little hope, but if there's a matchup tonight that's in his favor and in his tax favor, I mean that would be the one. And it helps that Eli Manning pretty much is a statue back there, so you don't have to worry about Jameis Winston like you did last week, evading the rush or the Cam Newtons of the world, those guys. So, if they can beat their man, Eli's not going anywhere, but down hopefully. So. Those two matchups, I think, on offense and then on defense, I think, are in Atlanta's favor tonight.
Yeah, I think this game should be Vic Beasley's, possibly his best game of the season, just because of the matchups. We saw against Cincinnati where the Falcons sort of flipped him and Tack, and had Tack rushing more from the left and Vic rushing more from the right. And that would make sense to do that this week because Chad Wheeler is the Giants' right tackle, and he's not good.
Yeah, he should not be starting.
And Nate Solder historically has always struggled with speed. We saw that in the Super Bowl where Dwight Freeney really worked them over in that game and was, other than Grady Jarrett, was really the only Falcons pass rusher that really had any form of success in that game. And so I think if Vic does play against Solder, who plays left tackle, while Tack, works over Chad Wheeler, I do think that's a matchup that Vic does have a potential to take advantage of and win a number of times so that we can actually see, one really potentially dominant game from Vic Beasley before the season is up. But, if he can't take care of business against Nate Solder and Chad Wheeler, that's tough because there's not going to be an easier matchup this season.
Right. I'm gonna mute the words Vic Beasley from Twitter if he doesn't have a good game tonight, because it's been like beating a dead horse. Everyone just going to town on the guy, and he's a great dude, and you feel bad for him, and he was a guy I always wanted to come to Atlanta. You want to see it work out, but yeah, you're running out of answers or excuses for the guy at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, you just really need a dominant performance from him. One really solid, like where he's just constantly getting pressure that will get the monkey off his back for at least a couple of weeks from people. You know how Falcon fans are, where it's just like you just need to make a couple of splash plays, and people will be like, "Oh yeah, you're good" for like 6 weeks. And that's all it really needs.
I'm reminded of that Arizona game back in 2016 where he was just harassing Carson Palmer every single snap. I mean, that's what I always think back on when I just hear, Vic Beasley, bus talk and all that. It's just the dude showed he has the potential to do it. I mean, whether it's inferior competition or not, like it was maybe against Arizona, I mean, that game right there is his marquee tape, in my opinion, of his Falcons career. Either that or the Rams game when he had the 3 sacks. But you're right. I mean, he needs that one dominant performance to remind folks that he does have this in him, but we just haven't seen it yet. So hopefully tonight's the night for Vic.
Cory, is there a matchup that you're looking forward to tonight?
Actually, yeah, and this is super, super random. I'm going to go Alford on Sterling Shepard because Shepard's their number 2 receiver, and I think that one of the big things tonight where if Quinn's able to really figure out Barkley and they keep Trufant going around and around on Odell, I think that Alford will have a really nice night against Sterling Shepard, who I think is a solid receiver, but Alford is really one of probably, he's probably top 20% in terms of quality of corners in the league. And I think he's another guy where he's just really having a good year. The corner play has been pretty strong, and I think another reason why this defense is still somewhat coherent, and they're able to at least stop some people sometimes. That'd be interesting to me. And I guess if I go offensively, I'm just excited to see Ridley just do what he does against the secondary, because I think the Giants, they've got Landon Collins back there, who's a good safety, and they've got Janoris Jenkins, who's a good corner, and I'd like to see him, continue to do what he's doing. I mean, he's really been my favorite part of this season. Obviously, Julio's going to get his, but just seeing Ridley continue to flourish is exciting. And I think that the thing that, the Giants are a bad football team, but there is some talent back there, so it is nice to see him whenever he does go up against a secondary that has something that they can hang their hat on, and still see him do well. I think that'd be exciting.
Now, Cory, it sounds like, because Shepard spends a ton of time in the slot, so it does sound like you feel like the Falcons could sort of do what they did against Cincinnati and have one of their top guys, it sounds like Alford shadowing, or Trufant shadowing Beckham and Alford shadowing Shepard in the slot. So does that mean that you would be in favor of seeing a little bit more of Isaiah Oliver playing that other outside spot, since the Giants, I don't even know who their third wide receiver is, because as Matt said, like they're dealing with injuries. It was Lattimore, but he's out for the season.
I think it's Benny Fowler, who they literally just signed last week or something.
So, I mean, one would hope that Isaiah Oliver could hold his own against Benny Fowler, the late, great Benny Fowler, who was, an excellent number 5 receiver in Denver for about 4 years.
He's got a ring, and we don't. So, before we hate on old Benny Fowler here, he got something right.
But it does sound like you seem like this might be a week where seeing a little bit more of Isaiah Oliver makes sense, it sounds like, for you.
Yeah, I think it sounds terrible. I don't think the Falcons are going to the playoffs, so I'm all for just letting things happen and trying new things and get Oliver out there. Like, if he's really a guy they were going to take in the first round, and, let's see it. I'm sure he's going to be a good player, but getting these early reps, I think, for corners, you don't want to hurt his confidence, and I think there have been times this year where he's made a dumb mistake that has really hurt the team, and I think that can really kind of hurt him in terms of, hey, I got to get my feet under myself. But again, this is a good matchup for him. If he's got Benny Fowler, then it's just that's a guy who hasn't been in the league till just this week. It's you can go do that. That's a preseason matchup. And I think that's a good thing for Oliver, because this is like preseason football, if we're just being very bluntly honest here. I know if they win, they go 3-4, but the NFC's tough this year, and they don't have the defense to make it in January. So if we can look at this season as kind of a prism of let's get guys developed, then put him out there. Get him some reps. Get him some primetime reps, too, because we don't know where the cat's going this year, and if something happens and they like trade offer to release him, like, you know, he's gonna have to step up pretty fast. So I'd like to see him get some reps now, especially in a game like this where it's, you know, obviously there's more pressure because there's lots of people watching, and he would get an opportunity against a receiver that, you know, he could be better than, honestly, because I think Oliver's got a lot of potential. So I'm hopeful that they get him some more reps tonight.
Makes sense. Yeah. You know, I'm a fan of Brian Poole, but he hasn't necessarily played at a level where you can necessarily profess that, you know, at the top of the mountain or whatever they say. But one of the matchups I'm looking forward to is Julio versus Janoris Jenkins. And what's interesting is the Giants have used Jenkins as a shadow corner in previous matchups against guys like DeAndre Hopkins. I'm curious to see if they do that again tonight. Jenkins has not played particularly well. So that's a matchup that I think the Falcons can take advantage of with Julio. And it's going to be interesting because due to the injuries to the other receivers, one does wonder if Julio is going to have to do the majority of the heavy lifting on offense tonight, which can sort of be a little bit of a double-edged sword because when the Falcons become a little bit too Julio-centric, it kind of makes them a little bit easier to defend. But at the same time, when they do become Julio-centric and he's playing at a really high level, as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers can certainly attest to over the years, it becomes an offense that's really impossible to defend. And so, you know, getting Julio involved early and often, I think, to sort of test the waters there, I think will make a lot of sense for the Falcons. And if Julio's going to dominate Jenkins early on, then that's something I think they can go back to that a number of times throughout the night. But if not, then, you know, we'll have to sort of see what Sanu and Ridley are capable of given sort of their limitations. I expect them to play. I expect them to contribute, but I don't necessarily know if we'll see the same players that we've seen in recent weeks where they've made a number of big plays, touchdowns and whatnot, and you know, Ridley doing his little stutter step double move stuff, with the bum ankle. I don't necessarily know if that's something that's going to be something that he can pull off tonight. So getting Julio involved, and Matt mentioned Austin Hooper. If Julio is not going to be that 200 plus receiving yards receiver tonight, then someone else is going to have to step up. If it's not going to be Sanu and Ridley, and if that's Hooper, great. Someone's got to do it. Coleman, Ito, whoever it is, Ricky Ortiz, if it has to be, I'm fine with that. So that's one of the matchups I'm looking forward to. Now, is there another matchup? We mentioned Saquon. We talked a little bit about the wide receivers. Is there another matchup that you're looking at this Giants team that worries you? Or do you feel like, for the most part, it's pretty even or in the Falcons' favor?
So I think for me, I'm kind of worried about the Giants' defensive line. There's been a lot of talk made about the Falcons' run game and how it's not, gotten off the tracks thus far this season. I think a lot of that has to do with just the execution and the blocking up front. I know Justice Mosqueda, a guy that writes for Optimum Scouting, he usually kind of puts out a stat of rushes, non-quarterback kneels that are less than a yard or less than 0 yards. So basically you're getting stuffed or you're getting negative yards plays. And the Falcons have been consistently up there among the worst in the league. And that pretty much tells me it's the blocking and not necessarily, the running backs or the play calling. Now, obviously, having Devontae Freeman masked a little bit of that because he can turn, nothing into something on quite a few of his runs, and not having him definitely plays a part in that. But I think, the O-line definitely just needs to do a better job. And I'm not sure that this is a great matchup to get going again, seeing as though they have the Giants have arguably the best run defender in the National Football League in Damon Harrison. And, added to that is the fact that the Giants are now a 3-4 team this year under defensive coordinator James Betcher. And we kind of know, we saw in the Steelers game what 3-4 defenses kind of tend to do to the Falcons. So, that's something that worries me a little bit. I think also Betcher being from Arizona and their history of being kind of a blitz-heavy type scheme, and we saw, again, what the Steelers did with the blitzing against the Falcons. Sometimes they have trouble picking up the blitz. So if he takes a page out of the Steelers' playbook and kind of uses their game plan that they use against the Falcons, I think Atlanta could be in trouble a bit if they don't, get their act together as far as, communication goes up front, and obviously, blocking some of those guys, like Damon Harrison, Dalvin Tomlinson's another great run defender. So I think, again, the Falcons are going to have to rely on Matt's arm once again and kind of be one-dimensional, and hopefully that's not an issue. It hasn't been for the most part, as long as they've kept him upright. The 2 losses, they've given up 27 quarterback hits, which is over half their total on the season. So, again, if they can limit the hits on Matt Ryan and Matt Ryan has time, I think they'll have no problem picking apart the back end. I'm not too concerned about the guys on the back. It's just a matter of, again, someone I didn't even mention, Olivier Vernon going up against Jake Matthews. Jake's been great this year, but Olivier is one of the best defensive ends in the league. I mean, that could be a matchup that could exploit Jake a bit. So that's my biggest concern is if they can block the D-line and maybe get somewhat of a run game going, at least to keep them balanced, then they'll be all right. But if they don't, then the Steelers game kind of creeps back into my mind as far as a similar type of scenario.
Cory, any other matchups that you got your eye on?
Yeah, actually, the interior, when you got Snacks and Dalvin Tomlinson going up against this interior offensive line, I think that could actually be a major, major turning point in this game if Atlanta's having to rely on the jet sweeps and the tosses and the outside runs, and they're not able to get much going in the middle with Tevin and Ito. Obviously, Damon Harrison is one of the He is one of the premier run-stuffing defensive tackles in the league. Dalvin Tomlinson's a really good interior presence. Alex Mack's not been nearly as bad as some weird people think he's been, but he's letting more pressures up than normal. And that is a little bit kind of because of his age, and he's getting a little older, which happens. But, I really think right now that, if they can limit, my guess is they're going to want to double Vernon and just completely take him out of the picture and just force the rest of this defensive line to do what they do against Ryan. I don't think the team's going to be able to get much of a pass rush. I just worry that run defense actually might be kind of stout tonight. Obviously, we know the problems that they have at linebacker, sans the great Stoop Life, half-size Stoop Life, but I think that they've really got to focus on trying to not force the run down the middle if it's not working. Find other ways to get a run game going if it's just getting tough to run on Snacks and run on Dalvin. So, I think that is a matchup that kind of gets me a little concerned if they really are going to be focusing on blasting this team up the middle, because I think it's going to be kind of tough.
Yeah, I think the offensive line is got a pretty big test tonight, and I've been very disappointed with their play this year outside of the Carolina game. So, don't let me down again, offensive line, at least for one more week. You guys have any thoughts that you also want to share about this game before we get into a prediction about tonight?
I guess the only other thing is just, I like to monitor who's playing where, snap counts and all that. And obviously we talked a little bit about Falcoholic. His snaps have steadily increased as the week's gone on, and last week he outsnapped Duke Rowley for the first time. I kind of expect that to continue. Tiff Blackman did mention in the pregame already that the Falcons are counting on him somewhat in this game. They like his physical tools in this matchup. So I do think he's going to be, the linebacker next to Devondre in the nickel reps, and hopefully he continues to show some strides because, that'd be great if a 6th-round pick. I mean, obviously, we didn't anticipate him, beating out Duke Rowley, the 3rd-rounder from 2017. But if they can salvage that by having Falcoholic turn into something and be that 3rd linebacker moving forward, that'd be great. And then the other thing, and I don't know if it's going to change, but I think the one weak spot continues to be strong safety and continues to be Jordan Richards. And, I've been hoping that they continue to do something similar with the linebackers and kind of, lay all their cards on the table and try guys like Keith Tandy in that spot, try Sherrod and Eastman in that spot, and see what sticks and see who the best of that bunch is, because that's probably what the Falcons are going to be, forced to deal with, forced to play with. I don't think they're going to make any more moves given their tight cap situation. So, I'm kind of interested to see if maybe we do see more Keith Tandy or more Sherrod and Eastman, outside of just special teams this week, or if, Dan's going to just double down on Jordan Richards and we're continuing to get what we've gotten, which is missed tackles and, blown assignments and all that. So that's another thing I'm going to be monitoring tonight.
Cory, anything else to add?
Yeah, I'm gonna hopefully by half. I hope Atlanta's down by like I don't know, like 30, so I can go do something else. But I'm just kidding. Joke. I don't know. I have stuff to do. I really, that's terrible. Who said that? Okay. So I think a big thing I want to see tonight is the second half defense. I think the biggest problem with this defense is that like they actually don't play as awful as you think they would play in the first half. Like they're fine, but then the second half rolls around. At least last week, and they just kind of fall apart. But sometimes it's the opposite, and they'll be really bad in the first half, and then in the second half they'll kind of scrape it together enough to where it's not terrible. So I just want to see this defense do something consistently. Like if you're going to be bad the entire game, just be bad the entire game. Give me that top 5 draft pick. Or if you're going to actually begin to kind of figure things out a little bit, begin to figure it out for the entire game and just be mediocre and, you know, give me at least a couple of enjoyable afternoons this fall. So I just want to see more consistency. I think that's been, you know, the communication's got to get better, but I want to see more consistency, especially from this pass rush, and I mean this incredibly sternly. If Dan Quinn would, again, this pass rush right now as it stands is as it was supposed to come into the season as, okay? The pass rush we're going to see tonight is what the team thought for 8 months or 9 months. This is what we want to field. If this isn't good enough, and I love Dan Quinn to death, I think he's a wonderful coach, and I hope he's here for the next 20 years, but he's got to really look at this and go, we didn't do what we were supposed to do. Because with Poe gone and Claiborne gone, if this pass rush, as it does tonight, and let's not forget Grady in the middle, that's going to really help a lot. If they cannot get pressure on this offensive line, sans maybe Will Hernandez, who's a good player, I don't know what they're doing. Like, this has been like the third or fourth year where they've not been able to get a consistent pass rush. I think Dan Quinn will really have to reconsider how they're evaluating that position outside attack and really what they need to do going forward. I think the interior actually has a lot of potential, and I don't imagine a lot of moves there in the offseason. Maybe replacing McLean with a better run-stuffing defensive tackle and a better kind of rotational guy there. But I think in general, the ends have to do well tonight. This is a huge night. You guys have said it exactly right. This is a huge night for them to go out there and just, you know, put the hurt on some guys they can put the hurt on, especially Vic. I love Vic. Great guy. He knows he has to do more. He's a better player than this, and I think that's the biggest problem. And people are like, well, he's regressing. No, I just think he's being bad, and I think he's not living up to his pretty consistent potential he showed 2 years ago. So if he can't do more tonight, then he's got to figure it out, because he's much better than this. And I think the biggest thing is I don't think Vic's bad, but I'm incredibly disappointed in his lack of candor and being better this year, because he's had ample opportunities to do exactly what he wanted to do. He wanted to go back to edge. He doesn't want to play linebacker. And if that's what he wants for his career, he's going to have to be more successful there, because you can't just beat guys on speed in this league. So I like Vic a lot, but I've defended him ardently in the past, year and a half, but right now, I'm beginning to get a little impatient with it, because it's like, buddy, you got an easy game tonight, but maybe he'll go out there and play well, and that'll be nice.
And on that note, we got a mailbag question from Justin Sandu at Justin201224 on Twitter. Asked, how many quarterback hits on Eli Manning will we get on Monday night?
8 or 9.
I hope so. Jesus, if we get less than that, I mean, what are we averaging? Like 5? 4 or 5 or something?
I was going to say 5. I'm just setting the bar really low, and it's going to be blown out of the water if they can do something good. Because this game is just a trap to me, because everybody thinks Eli Manning's been bad, that the Giants are bad, and it's just like, do you know the defense that we have right now? Like, that was the problem with the Steelers. The Steelers were bad until they played us, and then they looked like the 2006 Steelers with, the Iron Curtain or whatever it was called, playing on defense. So they've got to do more than what they're normally doing. So hopefully it's in that 10 or 12 category at least.
Yeah, look, I'm hoping for double digits. I'm not going to hold my breath on that, but it should at least be like 7 or 8 at a minimum. Sure. If they can't get to that number against this offensive line, then there's really no hope for this pass rush at all. Question before we move on to the rest of the mailbag. Evan Birchfield asks, score prediction for tonight. Cory, you go first.
I'll go 28-27 Atlanta. I think Ridley playing makes a difference. I think he is that important to this team now. He is that important to Sarkisian being comfortable. Calvin Ridley has given Steve Sarkisian, I think, 2-3 more years on this job. This offense works because of Ridley. He is more comfortable when Ridley is out there. When Ridley's not out there, he is not as comfortable. For some reason, bringing Ridley over from Alabama has completely cured Sarkisian of all of his ailments. At least somewhat. So I feel like he will have a good night. I think Julio will have a good night. I think that Tevin will be decent tonight when they get him kind of going outside and against these linebackers. So I'll go 28-27. I think it'll be close. I think the Giants are going to score points, but I think that they'll be able to get it in the end.
I'll go next. I think this is going to be a shootout. I think my hope is that the Falcons get up early, but as they always do, they're going to let the team back in the second half. So I'm thinking something around like 37-34 Falcons.
Gosh.
Look, there's no way this is Falcons defense is going to hold the Giants under 30 points. So if they're gonna win, they're gonna have to get close to 40, I think. So yeah, 37-34 Falcons.
Yeah, I'm hoping, again, we know what the Falcons have been. I want to see one double-digit win this year. I think if there's any matchup that it's going to be, it would be this one. So I think Atlanta's going to be able to just steamroll on offense. I don't think Giants are going to put up much resistance. I'm going to go 42-27. And one thing I want to add, and this is just a weird, obnoxious fact that I like to sometimes conjure up, but Eli Manning made his first ever career start in the NFL against the Falcons, and I think tonight, now obviously if they put up 27, maybe they don't go away from him, but I think tonight could be his last start with the Giants, and it could come against the Falcons. So that's just something I want to throw out there.
Sure that Eli is going to put 50 on us and finally get revenge.
I might have just jinxed it, and he might. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised either way, but I did.
You're going to add to his Hall of Fame resume tonight.
Listen, last week, though, I did tweet mid-game that the Falcons might have costed Mike Smith his job twice in Atlanta, and that worked out well. So I'm doubling down on those predictions, and I'm saying that the Giants might go away from Eli Manning after tonight's game. So we'll see what happens.
Well, I told people this week that if Eli can't light up this Falcons defense, then yeah, there's no reason to keep playing him.
Exactly.
This is as easy. Like literally, all he has to do is check the ball down to Saquon Barkley, and he'll throw for 300 yards tonight. Like that's all he has to do. So if he can't even do that, then like there's no hope for him.
So would Kyle Lauletta do the same thing if he was playing tonight? I guess, right? So
yeah, Kyle Lauleta's been tearing ACLs.
Why not go with him then? Build his confidence up, and then you got your future quarterback, your future Tom Brady. His confidence is sky high, and just roll with that then, if that's the case.
That's what I would do, but
yeah,
I would have gotten rid of Eli after last season. But
yeah, true.
Okay, let's get into the rest of the mailbag before we wrap up. A bunch of questions dealing with Devontae Freeman, which is why I wanted to hold off on the comments at the top of the show. I'll read off the questions, and you guys can sort of attack these mailbag questions the way that you want to. Evan asks, who will be the Falcons running back week 1 of 2019? Justin Sandu asks, well, with Freeman's inability to stay healthy, what percentage would you put on the Falcons keeping Coleman next season? Brian at your homeboy Brian asks, I am very concerned about Devontae Freeman's future as our running back. Do you think we should consider trading him if we can re-sign Coleman? Teams like Green Bay, San Francisco, or Detroit would probably take a chance on Freeman. And Zamir Stavanovich asks, what would you do now regarding Freeman? He might miss the entire season, and you can't really count on him. So what do you do considering how much money we owe him and how much that money counts against the cap? What might the Falcons do considering all that? So you guys... I'll give you the floor to attack these 4 different questions that are sort of dealing with the same topic, however you want to.
Cory, do you want to go first?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll be short about it. I think Freeman's better than Coleman, and I think that health is the only reason why Freeman is even mildly in a discussion of being moved elsewhere. So I'll just say this. If Freeman doesn't stay healthy in 2019... then I think the team will probably get a little bit nervous about letting the rest of that deal play out. They have an out at a certain point in that deal once the guaranteed money kind of dries up and they can kind of do what they want to with it. But I also feel like they're going to re-sign Coleman because I think that this team right now, even if Ito is playing well, I think they're going to be really, really nervous about Freeman's long-term health. When he's healthy, he's one of the best running backs in the NFL. There's no question about it. But I think that it's just health, and it's just the crummy part about this position is that it just really can wear on guys. And I just really hope that Freeman's going to stay healthy and he can have a big comeback 2019 because he's just so good. And you just watch his, you watch him play, and you just look at the way he cuts, look at his vision, you look at his patience, his agility, and his aggressiveness. Those are just some traits that Tevin doesn't have, and it's not Tevin's fault. It's just not quite as naturally gifted to be able to make those kind of moves, and that's why Freeman was able to ascend to where he is. He's got so much natural talent and so much natural vision. I think they will keep Coleman. So I think that's going to be the Robert Alford of this year, where we all kind of assume the guy was gone, and then like November rolls around and we got a 4-year extension on the table. The team's got more cap than people I think realize right now. Well, even in the deals they have to do in the spring are not quite as plentiful. These are more deals you're going to see more in the future, and you're going to see more contracts fall off the book. They're going to open up money. So I think that's the thing about the big brouhaha about contracts and people freaking out is like you forget the ones you're going to lose and the positions you're going to have to go younger at when you put more of these upper contracts in the book. So I'm not really that worried about the future of extensions, but I think that they're going to end up keeping Tevin just from a cautious standpoint of even, if we have to let go of Freeman, we can let Tevin take over and know that he can man the position. Maybe not quite as well, but he would still be good. So I'll say Freeman right now. I think he'll get healthy. I think they're really going to take a hard focus in the offseason on looking at his training, looking at what he needs to do to continue to get it, 2 or 3 more years of prime out of his career. I don't know if he's going to be able to do more than that with the way the health is going and just with where this position typically goes, even though I really don't think that running back is quite as dire as people think it is, because I think that, guys are just so talented and continue to do so well at it. But I don't know. It's difficult because you just don't know how Freeman's long-term health is going to be. But I think that's the thing that makes the difference. It's not a quality issue because when Freeman's healthy, we know what he can do. I mean, you just looked at him in Pittsburgh and looked at the runs he was able to get. But, we'll see. But right now, I think that we're going to have the same conversation in 19 with Tevin on a new deal and trying to figure out where that goes. And then once that happens, you'll have a bit more there'll be a bit more severity on the money because you can't obviously keep a Tevin and a Devonta contract for more than maybe a year or two. So we'll see where that goes.
All right.
Yeah, so this is a topic that I've been pretty passionate about lately. I wrote an article about a month ago on the topic of Rise Up Reader. Essentially, if they are going to keep Tevin and Devonta, it makes more sense. Actually, let me rephrase. If you're going to keep Tevin Coleman, it makes more sense to keep both Devonta and Tevin in 2019, and then in 2020 you can revisit, maybe getting rid of Devonta Freeman. And I say that because Devonta's still got a good amount of guaranteed money that hasn't hit the cap yet. Totals to $9 million from 2019 to 2021. So basically, if they were to move on from Devonta Freeman via trade or cut, if it was a trade, that $9 million accelerates onto the cap right away. So not only do you then have to think about what you're going to pay Tevin Coleman, but you have $9 million plus whatever you're giving Tevin pretty much locked up into your running back one position. That's not something Atlanta is going to want to deal with in 2019. Best case scenario, if they cut him, you're looking at $3 million in 2019. But again, you got to think about what you're paying Tevin Coleman. So either way, getting rid of Devonta Freeman and keeping Tevin Coleman, you're looking at the same amount of cap hit that you're looking at with Devonta Freeman in 2019. So in my mind, keep the best player, just like Cory said. Devonta Freeman, the only thing that Tevin Coleman has that Devonta Freeman doesn't have is that long speed. But as far as vision, elusiveness, as a pass catcher and as a pass protector, believe it or not, he's been graded out on par with Tevin Coleman the last several years. So, the complete back is Devonta Freeman. Obviously, the health injuries suck. It's unfortunate. But if he returns to full health, and I believe that the Falcons aren't going to give up on those odds, then the best case scenario for them is to keep Devonta Freeman. We're seeing what we're getting with Ito Smith is a guy that can shoulder the load as the RB2 going forward. And he's very similar to Devonta Freeman. So if Devonta was to check out with an injury next year. I mean, you have a very similar type back that has the elusiveness, that has the vision that Devontae Freeman brings to the table. Then it's just a matter of kind of building some more depth. That's why I kind of want to see Brian Hill, and it kind of pains me every time I see him inactive and then only rolling with 2 running backs, is because we're not going to see what Brian Hill can offer potentially as that second guy if Devontae was to go down again. So hopefully we get to see that at some point this year. But yeah, for me, financially, it doesn't make sense to get rid of him after this year. Perhaps in 2020 is something that they can revisit. But then from a football standpoint, Devontae Freeman's the better back. You got to keep the better back. So as far as keeping both of them, I won't rule it out. I thought they weren't going to bring back Ricardo Allen, and I was wrong on that. So it's possible, but I still think they have so many other needs in other areas, especially, bolstering this pass rush, building it up to what it needs to be in order for this defense to be successful. And that's why I'd rather them, unfortunately, it's the cost of doing business in the NFL is to say goodbye to some good players, and Tevin Coleman would be one of them. But I just think it's low. I'd put it at like maybe 20%, but again, never say never. It's possible, but I just think as far as keeping Devontae Freeman goes, that's a 0%. Getting rid of Devontae Freeman, that's a 0% chance in 2019.
Yeah. I think the way the contract is structured is his 2019 base salary is currently guaranteed for injury. So basically, from the way I understand it, if he doesn't come back this season, like he's getting that money, so he's not going anywhere. So if he ends the season on IR, that money automatically becomes guaranteed. So for all the people that are like, let's get rid of Devontae, you better hope he comes back in week 16, healthy and ready to go, I think. So I don't expect the Falcons to move on from Devontae after this season. I think right now Coleman is 50-50. I think the Falcons went into the season wanting to keep Tevin Coleman, but if we're being honest, I don't think Tevin Coleman has really done enough so far this season and in all the time he's gotten in Devontae's absence to really merit the Falcons really making it a major priority to bring him back. Now, obviously, we still got a second half of the season to go, and he showed improvement last week against Tampa Bay after a couple of games of just basically not doing a whole lot since that Carolina game. But right now, he's really only played like 1.5 good games in Devontae's absence. So we need that number to go up in order for the Falcons to really make a strong push to bring him back, in my eyes. So obviously, right now, with half the season left to be played, I would say there's a 50-50 chance of that happening. But we'll have to see. I do expect, I'm like 98.7% confident that Devontae Freeman's going to be back in Atlanta in 2019, and I'm 100% confident Ito Smith is going to be, and about 50% confident that Tevin Coleman is going to be at this current point. But that obviously can and will change over the rest of the 2018 season. So as for who's going to be the Falcons running backs next year, and we'll sort of see if the Falcons can sort of afford to stash Brian Hill on the roster and have him inactive for the rest of the season. Right now we've already dealt with a number of injuries, but I don't think those injuries are going to stop all of a sudden just because the football gods decided to smile upon the Falcons. So we'll have to see if they can, if other issues come up later in the season and they can basically afford to carry him. We'll have to see. But, now with Devontae being out, then one would assume that the Falcons will be able to hold on to Brian Hill for the remainder of the season. But we'll have to see how that goes. I don't necessarily expect the team to trade for Devontae. That's really the only realistic way I think the Falcons could get rid of Devontae is by trading him and having some other team pick up that money, which I don't necessarily expect to happen. From what I understand, next year's running back class is going to be a pretty solid one in the draft. So why would you trade for a 26, 27-year-old running back with recent injury issues when you can just go out and get a guy with fresh legs in the draft that's 21 or 22 or something like that? So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for another team to offer up a whole lot for Devontae Freeman. If the Falcons were willing to give him away for a 7th-round pick, I'm sure they could get takers, but I don't think the Falcons would be willing to do that. So, I think we got time for one more question. I know since, Matt, you're a big Matt Ryan fan, we'll go with Brian's question. Do you think Matt Ryan will still be around when he's? I say that like I'm not a fan of Matt Ryan.
Exactly.
Do you think Matt Ryan will still be around in his early 40s playing at a high level like Brady and Breeze? And how important do you think stability at the offensive coordinator position is for Matt Ryan to be at his best?
So, I mean, I think from a physical standpoint, he absolutely, can play into his 40s. He's, you can see he's definitely taking care of his body throughout his career. I think he, mentioned in an interview or some story that kind of he cut some weight at some point in his career, knowing that would benefit him later rather than kind of keeping on some weight, kind of slowing him down and stuff. So that part doesn't concern me at all. I think the one thing that does kind of concern me is just his personal life and just the fact that he is now a father, and you never know with guys. I mean, you're missing a good portion of your kid's life right now, and obviously, his contract, I obviously see him playing that out, and that would be until he's 38. But at that point, his kids will be kind of old enough to start in school and stuff, and that's something that maybe he doesn't want to miss out on, and this might be his last shot, this last contract, and he might not want to play for a fourth contract. So that's the only thing that concerns me maybe about him wanting to play like Drew Brees into his 40s or Tom Brady into his 40s, is that personal aspect. But if he does decide that, he's still got that drive and that fire inside of him, then, physically, I have no issues, or I don't see any problems with him playing into his 40s and playing well into his 40s. I think Matt Ryan, again, could be some homerism, could be some bias, but I think he is very overlooked as far as the annals of history, as far as the top quarterbacks go. And it's unfortunate that a lot of them base a lot of those, the pundits and the naysayers base a lot of that off of the fact that he doesn't have a ring, but the dude has everything else, in my opinion, and he's done it all. And so I think, he's right on par with those Brees and the Bradys and all those good guys, out there. So, yeah, absolutely, I think he can do it. It's just a matter of if he wants to do it.
Corey, do you have any thoughts on Matt Ryan's longevity?
We'll see. The problem with health is just you just never know when a guy's body is going to hit that point. I think he's been pretty healthy throughout his career. I don't think he's really, knock on wood, don't want to jinx anything, but he hasn't really missed a game for injury since like 2009. So he's just got that remarkable durability. But, when you hit around 39, 40 years old, unless you just are insane about it, like Tom Brady is, where it's just an obsession with trying to beat longevity and try to play for as long as you want to or can, I think he'll begin to kind of hit that point. It got Peyton right when he was 38, 39. Peyton's was just dramatic. I mean, he just went from like 15 being amazing to 16 being like a head on a stick. Like it was just, 14 to 15, excuse me. But that's just the tough part about it. This season he's taken a bit more of a beating than he's normally used to. So that's going to begin to play a part. And I don't like saying that. But if he continues to, because right now he's on pace to take as many sacks in his career as he has in probably 4 or 5 seasons, maybe that 13 year when this team really didn't have anybody to play offensive line. That's going to catch up with him. The Falcons are going to have to take a much, much harder look at their offensive line as he gets older, because the more he takes those hits, the less long he's going to be able to play. And that doesn't mean like he's going to have to stop playing tomorrow, but like it's just going to get to a point where the body will begin to wear down more, where he can, he can be like a healthy human, but he can at the same time, be an NFL quality quarterback. I don't know. I really don't. I think he's got 3 or 4 more years of this. But I think when he gets to about 37, 38, I'll begin to kind of be like, yeah, I don't know. Rodgers is still Rodgers at 35. I know the Packers aren't amazing this year, but he can still do this for maybe 3 or 4 more seasons. I think that's the time frame you want for him. But I think that around 38, 37, I would kind of begin to kind of wonder, like, okay, when is that process going to begin? And if it doesn't begin by the time he's 40, great. That's something the Falcons don't have to worry about for the next 7-8 years. But, you never know. you never know. So I think right now I'm kind of in a wait-and-see mode. But Matt's right. Obviously, he's taken care of himself and has shown pretty strong durability in the past. And I think that tends to help guys that want to play this, career for a while. So we'll see. I'm kind of on the fence about it.
Yeah. My thoughts are similar. I think he could play into his 40s if he wanted to. Typically, I sort of expect these high-level quarterbacks to play until they're 37, 38, as Cory mentioned. And after that point, I don't necessarily expect them to do that. But obviously, you have guys like Drew Brees and Tom Brady that do want to do that and do try to do that. Could Matt Ryan be another guy added to that list? Potentially. The way that the rules are going, it does seem like quarterbacks will be able to play a little bit longer. And so instead, saying 37, 38 is that point where guys maybe start to sort of lose it or decide to hang it up typically. Maybe that age in the near future, by the time Matt Ryan gets there, because he's, 33 now, maybe that age will be 39 or 40 by the time, he gets up there. So that may be the situation. We'll have to see. But right now, my expectation for Matt Ryan is that we'll probably get 5 more years out of him, and I'm not necessarily expecting more out of that. So I'm hoping that the Falcons can maximize the next 5 years with Matt Ryan that I feel pretty confident that they'll get from him. But beyond that, I think that's just more him playing for the sake of playing, not necessarily, playing for our sakes. That's confusing. But I'm not expecting him to be like, this Tom Brady type of guy. Or let me say this. Let me rephrase that. I don't expect the Falcons to be this Patriot type of team where you expect them to be winning Super Bowls every year. So the fact that Tom Brady does decide to play every season until he's 42 or 45 adds on their Super Bowl window by 3 or 4 or 5 years. That's just the life of a Falcon fan. You just don't expect those sort of things. But we'll see. And that'll do it, guys, for tonight's episode. And we got the kickoff for the game coming up in a couple of minutes. So, take your bathroom breaks, get your snacks or whatever. And that's where we'll leave you guys out. We appreciate Cory and Matt for joining me tonight to do this show. Before those guys do their plugs, I'll plug the show in terms of what you guys can respond to. If you want to get your questions on, we'll probably do a show tomorrow night recapping this game, just because we got nothing better to do, given it's a bye week. So if you want to get your questions in, you can use the hashtag Falcons mailbag. You can also tweet at the show Falcons PFC. I am at Falcfans. I'll go ahead plug Matt and Cory's Twitter. Matt is at Matt Karoly, and Cory is at Cory Woodroof 47. But I will give the floor to those guys to let you know what they are coming up with on their various websites and or in one guy's case, a very low-key podcast. So, Matt, I will give you the floor first and let the people know and plug whatever you want to plug.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot in the works right now. I've been doing a monthly or bi-weekly mailbag, whatever I've been feeling like at riseupreader.com. So send in your questions, Matt Lanham mailbag, just tweet me questions. People have been tweeting me questions. If something good hits, I'll usually write about it. So just like Aaron said, my Twitter is at Matt Karoly. So if you got any Falcons questions, send them my way, and you can catch that stuff at riseupreader.com.
Cory?
You can find me over at the Falcoholic with all of my random ramblings and vocal voraciousness, I guess, if we're going to do alliteration. I've got the podcast over there, the post-game podcast that we'll obviously have after the game, probably Tuesday or Wednesday. So be on the lookout for that, and then we'll do a bi-week show too, just because, like Aaron said, there's nothing to talk about, so might as well. Read the Falcoholic, the superior Falcons content on the internet, eclipses all and destroys all. So we're better than everybody, and we want you to know that. So that's the scoop on that. I'm kidding. I love you guys. You do a good job.
Well, since I got to get the last word in, go ahead, subscribe to Falcon Central Radio or the Pro Football Central Radio page on YouTube. Hit that bell icon so you make sure you get the live updates. And, of course, check out Falcon Central Radio on Facebook. So there you have it, guys. Enjoy the game tonight. And, go Falcons, rise up, in brotherhood, whatever you